This is Ari Koretsky, and welcome to Jews You Should Know, introducing the broader community to interesting and inspiring Jewish men and women making a difference in our world. Some are already famous, some not yet so, but each is a Jew you should know.
We are back with another fabulous episode of Jews You Should Know. This week, fabulous guest, Dene Ban. And what a story do we have to share. Dennis, without giving it away, you'll hear in a few minutes, has a remarkable narrative about how he discovered his Judaism as a teenager through extraordinarily unusual means, and what that journey has been like for him in the many years since. In addition, he is one of the most acclaimed venture capitalists in Israel as a managing director of Our Crowd, the world-renowned fund founded by John Medved, and he is at the heart of the Startup Nation story as well. So really, this is kind of like two fantastic plots in one when we speak about Dene Ban's life, both his personal Jewish growth and his professional trajectory over the last number of years. So very excited to introduce you to Dennis. Interestingly enough, as a philanthropic venture and as an additional arena of his interest, Dennis is a partner with last week's guest, Jay Schultz, on the Am Yisrael Foundation, revitalizing the Anglo Aliyah scene in Tel Aviv, offering a tremendous number of programs to Olim, to immigrants to Israel, as well as native Israelis in the arts and politics, Jewish enrichment, Shabbat, so many different other niche areas. We don't speak that much about it in this interview because we covered that extensively when we spoke with Jay, and also Dennis had enough in his own unique portfolio to keep us busy for the entire hour and really could have gone much beyond. Meanwhile, a reminder as always to follow us on social media at Jews You Should Know, spelled out fully on Instagram and Facebook. Jews You Should Know with the letter U on Twitter. Please subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it may be. Please spread the word so that others may do so as well. Comments or suggestions to jewsyoushouldknow@gmail.com. And now to our conversation with Jewish traveler and Our Crowd managing director, Dene Ban. We are here with Dene Ban, the managing partner at Our Crowd, which is the largest venture capital firm in Israel, an amazing firm. But Dennis also has an incredible personal story, a Jewish odyssey to go with his remarkable professional portfolio. And we're very excited to explore both of those today. How are you, Dennis?
Great. Fantastic.
Wonderful. Now, listeners will hear that I'm pronouncing his name Dennis, but the truth is his name is spelled Denes. So his Dean's, Denez, he's not American. So my pronunciations are really kind of a bastardization of what it actually is supposed to be. Dennis, could you give us like the authentic sound of the name?
Sure. So in Hungarian, it will called Danish, almost like a Danish, but it's Hungarian, so it's a Danish.
There we go, Danish. Look. We're recording it around breakfast time. For me, you're already late in the afternoon, but for me, it's breakfast time. I have not eaten breakfast, so if I keep pronouncing your name the correct way, I'll probably get pretty hungry. So, Dennis, are you from Hungary?
Correct. I was born in Budapest.
Now, I know one word in Hungarian. The word is utana.
Utána.
Yes.
You mean going after someone?
Yes.
Like after? Okay.
That's the only word I know. Why do I know that word?
It's not a word that usually people say.
I used to work with a guy part-time in a kind of a side gig that I was doing, and he was of Hungarian origin. He was American, but he actually ran all kinds of trips, like heritage trips to Hungary. And he would speak to, Hungarian to a lot of different people back home. He was always saying that word, like utana, like kind of like next, like onward, like, and that's the only word I know.
Sounds good.
So that is my vocabulary, extensive vocabulary of one word. So tell me a little bit about your background in Hungary. Obviously, Hungary was a communist country for a long time, and obviously it's complicated relationship with Jewish history, and was decimated at the end of the Holocaust in 1944. So what's kind of your family's background and your background?
Sure. So, maybe I just got in the middle. So I was 13 years old, and actually I was playing professional water polo in Germany, and I got into a fight with another guy actually from my own team. We started fist fighting in the water, and I punched him in the face. He also punched me in the face a couple of times, and then I shouted at him that he's a dirty Jew. Actually, I said it a bit less sophisticatedly, but I think it's in a podcast. I have to make sure that I'm using the correct word, but something along those lines. At least a dirty Jew, and the coach heard it, and he told my father when he picked me up at the airport back in Budapest. And on the way home, my father told me that, son, two things. One, never use the F word or the D word, and especially don't say F Jew because you are also one.
Wow.
So that's the way I found out I was a Jew. I was 13 years old, so I guess probably most of the listeners had a bar mitzvah.
Say, happy bar mitzvah, you're Jewish.
This was my bar mitzvah present from my parents. Right.
Unbelievable. Well, first of all, who won that fight, by the way?
I think it was pretty much undecided. But I definitely won big time on the long term.
You won on the long term. That was worth getting into the
long,
fight.
Long term, yeah.
So obviously that indicates that your family was not, raising you as very Jewish at all.
We had a feast on Yom Kippur usually.
So where did this all come from? What was the origin of the actual family? Why was your Judaism concealed to that degree?
So later on, I found out that all my 4 grandparents were Holocaust survivors. And it was probably 50% a miracle that my parents married, because they both were Jewish and all the grandparents were Jewish. But once I found I was Jewish, it's very interesting. I found that actually most of my parents' friends, socially, they were Jews. So it was interesting that they kept socially Jewish. Just I didn't know anything. I didn't know Yom Kippur. I didn't know Hanukkah. I didn't know Pesach. I don't know anything. Literally, we had a Christmas tree and Santa Claus and Passover, but not Passover, like Eastern egg. We got Eastern eggs at the beginning of April.
So did they raise you with any kind of religion, or that was just sort of like a general cultural thing?
General cultural thing. Oh, don't forget that also this is Hungary in the 1980s, which that whatever the Holocaust didn't kill, communism did.
Right.
So whatever left, the communism killed.
So
right?
After the Holocaust, your grandparents stayed in Hungary. It sounds like all 4 of them.
Correct.
And I guess they made a conscious choice to hide their Jewish identity.
Correct. They did. I mean, if I fast forward the story, after I sold one of my companies when I was 30, I decided to explore my Jewish roots, and I went to Israel. And I decided to go to a yeshiva after some yeshiva shopping. And the first year, in the summer after the first year yeshiva, I went home to Budapest to see my father. And he gave me a box. Now, he hated the whole thing. I mean, I did everything exact opposite as he imagined. My son, who is like a successful businessman and this and that, and now he goes back. Basically, he goes against the tradition of our family, which is from generation to generation, we left Judaism. My great-grandparents were maybe Orthodox, and my grandparents became Reform, and then they give up everything, and my father basically, and then I didn't even know I was Jewish, right? I just followed the exact track of how to lose Judaism, right? And here I am and going against the tradition. So he was very upset, but he just moved apartment, and he gave me a box that he found. And in that box, when I opened it, I found all the papers for 250 years back of my grandparents. And one of the first things that I found, which was very interesting, that my grandfather, my father's father, I found that his school grades, and not that his grades were so great, but where they came from, rabbinic school. He finished rabbinic school, my grandfather, I never knew. He was actually, and I found his diary as well, where he lived in 1933. He left rabbinic school and he became an illegal communist, which was at that time hidden, like they had to hide. It was illegal, so he was hiding communist. in the 1930s until basically the war broke out, and then he became a hiding Jew. So basically in like 10 years of his life, he was hiding, first as a communist and then a Jew. And then when the Soviet army liberated Hungary, he was in joy. And he joined the Communist Party and became a totally believer that this is going to be the new Messiah. And he became a philosophy professor at the university. Just I call him that he stayed like a rabbi, just the content was a little bit different.
He was a believer till the end.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have a relationship with your grandparents?
Unfortunately, he died when I was my father's father died when I was 3 years old. So no. On the other side, on my mother's side, yes, my mother's mother is still alive. She's 93, Baruch Hashem, and I Skype with her every day, and she is fantastic.
Did your grandfather on your father's side that you know of, did he ever become disillusioned with communism when he saw how it actually played out in the world, or he was a believer till the end?
I think he was a believer in the end, but to be honest, I don't know. I don't know that much. I mean, my father was an anti-communist, so he respected his father very much, but he was totally like a revolutionary, as much as you could be a revolutionary in Hungary. And I think he would have been in prison if it wasn't his father that,
Protection.
protected him. I know that I know for a fact. But yeah, I don't know if my grandfather ever I'm sure if he's a normal, smart person, and I hope he was. I mean, I'm sure internally you must have real doubts about, if you read Solzhenitsyn or any other, or Sharansky, the truth.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to that moment when you were 13 years old and you get off the plane and your father, smacks you across the face, proverbially, and says, don't curse Jews. And by the way, you are a Jew. Do you remember how you felt at that moment?
So I'll be very honest. Unfortunately, not really. I was, this is when I tell my story, that's one of the questions I would ask, and I wish I remembered. I was obviously shocked. I didn't know what it meant. First of all, I really thought that it was a curse word, so I didn't know what to do with it. And luckily at that time, I didn't have to deal with it because it wasn't out there. Nobody ever asked, or it was never a question. In school, nobody knew who was a Jew or not, and it had absolutely zero effect on my life until the year after, when my father's as good Jewish parents, they put me into a private Christian school, and then I had to deal with it.
So do you remember, at least at that point, did you start resenting that label, or did you say, okay, if that's me? Did you start becoming sensitive to anti-Semitism?
No, I resented it. I was ashamed of it. I was partly ashamed of it. I mean, I must admit. I mean, I never lied about it, especially because literally a year later, I went to a Christian school, and there I had to be basically on class 1. On the first class, everybody was like, there are the Catholics. You go into Catholic class, and there is the class for Protestants, and then there were the 3 Jews. And I think that's how, by the way, anti-Semitism is, because there were not enough Jews to have a rabbi come in to the class. So the first class, twice a week, we had a break for a whole hour, and all the other kids had to go to class. So which was, I think, is that's how anti-Semitism is built, basically. We were playing soccer outside, and all the others were like.
It's like in prison where they sometimes give the kosher people better food.
Yeah, right. So, but I really was an atheist, so I didn't care, and yeah, I mean that's what.
Did you get teased a lot in high school?
A little bit. No. I got in. I was beaten up a couple of times because I was a Jew, but not majorly. Just I don't think it was because I was a Jew. It was probably something else. But then they threw at me that F Jew. I got it back what I said, but not. It's not because I don't think it's because I was a Jew, because it's just who I was, and then just throw it at me.
Did you keep playing water polo?
No, I stopped water polo when I started my high school studies.
So what did you start to do? I guess you graduated high school, and again, Judaism wasn't a part of your life. Still, it just was like a fact in the background. And you said you were an atheist, and I guess you had dreams of making it in the world of capitalism after the fall of communism. I guess the economy opened up, and where did your life take you?
So actually, I moved to Sweden. I did my MBA in Sweden. So I lived in Sweden for 4 years.
That was after college?
No. So that was direct after high school. So direct after the Christian high school, I moved to Sweden, and I was a musician. So I played in blues and jazz bands, and I saved some money.
What do you play?
I played the harmonica, the blues harp.
Cool.
Blues harmonica. Yeah, you can look it up. It's on YouTube.
I was going to ask for a live demo, but okay.
Yeah, well, we can if you want to. At the end, if you're still with me. So I saved some money up, and I was always I had a spiritual craving in me. So I had this duality. I wanted to make money, I wanted to be successful, and then I always thought that there is something much bigger, which I didn't call it God or nature, or whatever, but something I didn't even know the word really spirituality, but there was something bigger. I was always looking. And, by the way, like after yeshiva, I put together, I remember I put, when I first put down my shidduchim, my marriage, what is it called? My dating profile, I described myself as a yippie, which was a combination of a yuppie and a hippie, right? Because I had this duality in me always. I wanted to be a kind of a yuppie. I was kind of attracted to the yuppiness, which means be successful, but at the same time, I had this very strong hippie part in me. And when I was 19, after first year of college, I had this little savings from the musical career, and then I decided to explore spirituality. And this is when I had my first trip. As a good Jew, if you are interested in spirituality, where do you go? Obviously, you go to India, right? So I went to India, and that's where I really had my first real kind of spiritual experience. I fell in love with Buddhism and Hindu Buddhism and Osho, and I had a guru who was. I just hope your audience is not taking notes. I mean, you don't stop listening here. You have to go to them because
okay, great having you.
Everybody, okay, stay tuned for next. So I really had an amazing experience there, and then after 2 months, I remember I was so impressed by what I felt, and is that I told the guru that I don't want to go back to school. I want to stay here and learn, much more immersed into the Hindu Buddhist ideas. And then he told me that your time hasn't come yet. You have to go home and finish your studies. My guru told me. Baruch Hashem.
Incredible. Did he know you were Jewish, by the way?
No. Well, I mean, maybe it wasn't never. It's not one of those stories that you are a Jew, go to Israel. I know, Ariel Kor and many of the other famous stories. It's Akiva Tatz's, sorry, but it's not none of this. He just said you have to go and finish your studies.
Did you encounter a lot of Jews there, or a lot of Israelis?
No. So this was before the Israeli kind of invasion. This was in 1994, 1995, I think 1995. So it was a bit before the Israelis started to kind of discovered India.
So you went back to Sweden and continued your studies.
Correct. Finished my MBA. Again, nothing to do with any. I learned a little bit of here and there, but nothing on spirituality. Very open, but nothing to do with Judaism in Israel. And I started my career. I became a diplomat. So I finished my MBA. I became a diplomat for the Swedish Foreign Ministry, Swedish government.
So you were a Swedish citizen? Well,
yeah. Well, that's a longer story. But I was working as a diplomat. Let's put it this way.
A spy.
No. You say I'm a diplomat. Literally, I was a diplomat. I wasn't a spy. No, I'm sorry to disappoint the audience. No spy stories here. And while I was working already as in the Swedish Foreign Ministry, I ran their management consulting department. At the end, I started as a soldier, last in the hierarchy, but I won a scholarship in Cyprus, and I went there. I was there for a month, and if I was already in Cyprus, I said, you know what, I just backpacked to Israel. So I bought a ticket to Israel, and I just went over to Israel, and that was, I was 25. I came to Israel first time for a week.
What was that experience?
Mixed. I mean, obviously very interesting. I tried to explore Israel. I backpacked all over the whole country. I was in I went to Jericho and Ramallah. I went to see the Palestinian refugee camps as well. I was a good Jewish boy, which means I was a liberal lefty guy and wanted to see how the full picture of Israel. Went to Tel Aviv and all over, went to up to Tzfat, and it was amazing experience. But the most important experience, luckily, on Friday, I decided to go to Jerusalem. And I remember clearly, I arrived with my backpack to Jerusalem Friday morning. I went through the shuk, the Arab market, because that's what you don't go to the Jewish old city, you go to the Arab old city, obviously much more exciting. And then I came to the, what is it in English? The Wailing Wall, I think it's called.
Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, yeah.
Well, Wailing Wall, yeah, I think it's called the Wailing Wall. I was there with my backpack, and there was a rabbi who, well, I can tell you who that was, Rabbi Meir Schuster.
Wow, he was still around then. Wow.
It was Rabbi Meir Schuster, who actually, I started a conversation with me, and he asked, are you a Jew? I said, yeah, I am. I said, your mother is Jewish? Yeah, my mother is Jewish. And he says, have you ever had a tefillin? I said, what do you mean? He said, you want to try it on? I said, Rabbi, how much does it cost? You are a Jew. Okay. So it's free. I said, okay, give me two. So he put one on my arm and one on my hand. It wasn't exactly like this. But basically, he put tefillin on me. That was the first time I had tefillin on. I was 25. And then he asked me, what am I doing tonight? And I said, Rabbi, are you asking me out? What's going on here? And,
you're not my type, man.
So he said, just don't worry, just show up here at the fountain, where the hand wash, be here at sunset plus half an hour. And there will be a lot of young people, and we go for dinner. There will be a dinner. I said, okay, free dinner. I mean, I like that religion, So, and the rest is history. That was my first Shabbat.
Do you remember where you went? Who you went to?
I 100% remember. And by the way, where I went later on, 5 or 6 years later, he was my sandek. He held my head when I had my circumcision. I mean, my brit milah, because Americans. I don't know if you can cut this off if you don't want to.
No pun intended.
Yeah, but, they have at least circumcision, just not maybe an Orthodox way. So but Hungarians, communists, we don't, nothing. So, and he was under my chuppah 20 years later, or 15 years later, and he's basically my second father.
Who is it?
Abba and Pamela Clayman, the Claymans.
Oh, the Claymans, sure.
Yeah. So it's Abba and Pamela. So Pamela,
yeah, famous people.
Pamela lights a candle for me every Shabbat, and Abba, and they did my Sheva Brachot. They did my. I mean, it's like they're basically my most, one of my closest families.
Amazing, yeah, and they're very. They do an amazing amount of work with Israeli soldiers, right, and hosting and everything like that. Incredible. That's wonderful. So obviously you went back to, back to Sweden or back to Hungary. You went into business, started a company.
Yeah. So 25, I have this amazing Shabbat experience. Go back to Hungary and Europe. So I've been stationed in different parts of Europe, working for this management consulting part of the Swedish Foreign Ministry. It was amazing experience. 5 years later, fast forward, I had an exit. I had first I was joining Boston Consulting Group, the BCG, but I had another company on the side which I built, and I was very lucky. The company got acquired, so I had a little bit of liquidity, started doing a little bit of real estate, and started to get into tech. And really, I tried to cut probably people, when they say I'm cutting a long story short, it usually becomes long, but I really tried to cut most about it. I started going back and forth with Israel a couple of times just for interest, and again, absolutely no interest in doing anything and in Judaism, and no relationship. But when I was in Jerusalem, I started to started learning a little bit. I went to Esha Torah, it's next to where the claim in the old city, very well situated, and I started to ask little questions, and I decided that after maybe a third trip, again, I'm coming for 4 or 5 days and just learn a little bit, or go to Tel Aviv and go to Jerusalem, hang out with friends, and I said that there is something here. There is something here that has to be explored. But I knew how my psyche works, and I know that once I'm back on the plane, back to business, it's all behind me. It's impossible to take time out and just leave your career. And again, this is before my exit. I try to cut out some details before when I still have a normal work. You work basically 15 hours a day, 7 times a week, typical management consulting business, and BCG, McKinsey world. So what I did is actually I sat at the table of the claimants and I wrote to myself 3 letters. I addressed it, and I left it with the claimants, and I wrote the letters to myself, what I felt now when I'm in it, in my learning, in my experience. And I said, if I'm not back 6 months, please send me the letters, 1 every month. And exactly as I kind of planned, imagine, I went back, I have my girlfriend and the world, life, you sometimes you think about Israel, but no way you're going to give up your job. And you're like, and a couple of things happened, then the exit and this, but still it's not going to be, you can't just leave. You just can't just pack and leave and just leaving. And it's so crazy giving up for yeshiva or something. And the first letter arrives, and I read it, and come on, Dennis, you've really been brainwashed. I don't know what you ate there, Throw away the letter. And the second, and same thing. And the third, I decide, you know what, there is something here. I bought a ticket and I came to Israel. That was a week before. Actually, it was probably exactly, if I'm thinking about now, because it was 5 days before Pesach.
Great timing.
Yeah, good timing, to do this. And then that whole process that I went through, and I'm not going to go into now the details again, the medical process, whatever. I decided to do it, and they did it, and I decided to go to yeshiva. So I like Aish when but it wasn't my everyone has to find his own place. That's with work and everything. So I ran into someone who was in the old city from a place called Machon Yaakov, from a yeshiva called Machon Yaakov. Machon Shlomo, maybe you heard, but this is Machon Yaakov, which is his brother, yeshiva. And he told me that, why don't you come over to the yeshiva to check it out? Which was not in the old city, much more, not as accessible. It's in the outskirts of Jerusalem. And after Seder, I went over there and I just fell in love with it on day one, and decided to, when I go back to Budapest, I didn't have to write any more letters to myself. I signed up to the yeshiva, and then I came home and I basically terminated my contract and broke up with the girl and packed up and came back for 2 years into yeshiva.
What's fascinating about Machon Yaakov, for those unfamiliar, is it's led by someone who himself was a former business executive, was very deeply involved in large-scale mergers, and was living the Wall Street life as an observant Jew, but nonetheless was deeply ensconced in business. And then at a certain point decided to move to Israel and open up this institution. So I'm just wondering, Dennis, if that connection to Rabbi Jacobs, if that was a pivotal part of that synergy that you felt in that institution.
100%. I think the uniqueness with that yeshiva was that, well, I really found out later on. Then I just felt it. No, I didn't rationalize. I didn't understood it. I didn't understand it. But later understood it. Is that, by the way, I don't call it yeshiva. I call it kind of an executive MBA in Mensch studies. That's what I kind of call it. They only take like 12, 14 guys every year. So it's very small. After 2 years, they kick you out. There's no way you can stay. And the idea is not to make you into something that you are not. They try to show you the beauty of Judaism, but that resonates and that relevant to you. So they want you to go back to the world where you are, be a Jew, be a Kiddush Hashem, somebody who represents the Jewish values, be a mensch. But basically, if you are a nuclear physicist, be a nuclear physicist. If you're a doctor, be a doctor. And if you are a businessman, be a businessman. But just keep Shabbat, keep kosher, learn every day, and represent the Jewish values to the outside world. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a full-time learner. It doesn't have to be, you have to learn to be a rabbi. Be yourself.
That message, I guess, really stuck with you because you certainly did continue back into the world of the high-end business and startups and venture capital and so forth. I guess at some point you decided when you finished this 2-year executive MBA of sorts, you decided that you wanted to stay in Israel and pursue your career there?
So I came back to Israel. First of all, I started doing some investments. First, I went to Hungary, did a sort of real estate. Then I started a company called Pocket Guide, which became the world's leading travel application. We won TechCrunch. For those who are in tech, they know what it is. And I moved the company to Silicon Valley. So I lived in Palo Alto.
This was after yeshiva.
It's not yeshiva. I'm already religious. I'm full religious, Orthodox Jew, obviously modern, working. And the rabbi there, Rabbi Feldman, I don't know if you...
Yemek Bracha.
Yeah, Mebracha, which is one of the most special persons I met. He told me that, Dennis, we want you here, but only once you're married. You will never find very unlikely you will find a good religious Jewish girl here. So you have to go back to Israel and come back with your wife. So, I started going back and forth between the valley and Israel. And that's when I met someone called John Medved, who is probably one of the most well-known venture capitalists in Israel. And that's when he was building our crowd, and it was still in the garage. And I joined him and moved back to Israel. I didn't marry him, but basically I probably spent more time with him than with anyone else. But yes, I'm a venture capitalist when it comes to business. When it came to marriage, it took me a little bit. I wasn't really a risk taker. But thank God, yes.
I was saying, who's better looking, him or Mayor Schuster?
Yeah, exactly. Probably Mayor Schuster. No, but,
and he's not even alive. But so, yes, how did you find a girl? What were you looking for in a spouse? Were you looking for somebody who was also going to be very, much out there in the world and building a career and things, or were you looking for more of an anchor?
So I think I found both. I'm very lucky. Actually, I've known her for a couple of years, but we were never single at the same time and available, or we were in a different place in life. But actually, funny. So I started writing a weekly blog. So I write a Divrei Torah on the parasha, but for bringing in business, psychology, philosophy, and tech into it. So it's a very kind of a unique take on the weekly portion. Actually, I'm putting out a book soon. So I'm just in discussion with a couple of publishers.
A collection of your columns?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she was on it. And we haven't been in touch for a couple of years, but she was on the list. And then one day she replies with some questions on it. And I said, I don't understand this. I don't agree with that. With your conclusion. And I said, oh, okay, by the way, because I spent 70% of my time in Asia. I lived in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan mainly in the last 6 years.
Through our crowd.
Yeah, through our crowd. I said, by the way, next week I'm back in Israel. Why don't we discuss it next a cup of coffee? And the rest is history, as they say. So she challenged me, obviously, but she's also in the world of both try to combining the kind of work and kind of physical world and the spiritual, because she's obviously religious and Shomer Mitzvot lady, but she's been actually a professional ballet dancer. So she's also about tshuva, somebody who found Judaism or the religion in late in her life. She was a professional ballet dancer, danced with the San Francisco Ballet, went to NYU, and then she decided to come to Israel, exploring her Jewish roots, and then became religious.
So she's an American.
She's American, Californian. I don't know if that counts.
You got the hippie in you. There you go.
Yeah, I got the hippie. That's right.
Where did you guys choose to settle down?
Tel Aviv. Sunny downtown Tel Aviv.
Wow. I just recently interviewed Jay Schultz.
He's my partner. We run this organization together.
Oh, you're working together with them?
Yeah, I had a 2 hours Torah learning with him this morning.
That's amazing. Okay, he kept you quiet in our interview. He didn't make a big.
Well, he's ashamed of me. I am proud of him. He's probably ashamed of me.
That's really, really beautiful. So, tell me a little bit, Dennis, about your career now, and a little bit about our crowd. It's a very well-known venture capital firm. If I'm not mistaken, is the concept is to give anyone or people with even of lesser means access to invest in Israel, kind of like micro investments, even if you're not, a massive, wealthy, tycoon, to be able to have access to the really exciting aspects of Startup Nation. in Israel? Is that kind of the vibe of our crowd?
Great. I think you done the deal. I mean, we're actually looking for a investor, maybe,
Don't tempt me, Dennis. I think the pay is a lot better than what I'm doing now. So,
No, but basically, maybe just a step back, because what is the problem, right? The problem is, and I think you said it right, what we see in the markets that if you invested in a company, probably everybody heard a company called Apple, right? If I was Steve Jobs and I just pitched now to the audience Apple the first time, it's still in the garage, and you invested in Apple, if you're the first investor, and then you sold it when the company went public, if you invested $10,000 and you sold it at IPO, it would be around $6 million. You made like 600 times your money. Now, investing in private companies, even now we know Apple is a great story, but investing in Steve Jobs, it wasn't easy, right? It's illiquid, there are risks with it. So not many people want to invest in the private markets. So you may only invest when a company goes public, right? So if you invested when Apple went public, if you invested $10,000 there, again, I'm simplifying around, you would have made another 600 times your money, maybe a little bit more. Yes, to invest in $10,000 at IPO, Apple made like maybe 400, 600 times your money. Okay, hundreds of times your money, that's for sure. And this was true, by the way, for Microsoft. Microsoft, the IPO was even, the returns on after post IPO was even bigger. So basically what we see that the value creation, historically, if you look at the 80s, 90s, is divided equally between, or closely equally between, private and public. So you can make money on the private markets pre-IPO, and you can make very nice returns to the public. What happens in the last 10, 15 years, if you compare it, most of the value creation moved from public to private. Most of the value is created on the private markets pre-IPO.
even though the stock market has been sky high.
Yeah, let's say you have to put the last 18 months in brackets, okay? That what's happening is crazy, right? With the SPAC market and the public, crazy. But even with that, because let's look at one of the best IPOs, one of the most exciting, let's say Facebook, okay? Facebook went public at 40, 50, I can't remember exactly. Now it's maybe, I don't know, 300, let's just say that. So you made on Facebook, how much? Made it like 5-6 times your money, okay? 5-6 times your money since I think went public 2012 or 2013. It will never be, I guarantee you, and that I put my money on it, you will never make 500 times your money. In order for Facebook to match Microsoft's public returns, it has to be probably like 50 trillion US dollar valuation, and that's like 3 times US GDP, okay? Right? So it will never happen, okay? So you can get a nice return on the public markets, but on the private, you need, if you're a sophisticated investor, whether you have $500,000 or $100 million or $1 billion, you need to put more money into the private markets.
Although the private markets are much more volatile, right? And much more risky.
Well, not volatile, but much more risky. You're right. So, but it comes with a price. Private markets are illiquid. It's not public markets. You can sell next moment, right? You can buy Zoom shares or, whatever, GameStop and etc. You can buy and you have liquidity, but not the private. Not the private. It's much less liquid, but that's where the biggest upside is. Now, the issue is that, public markets, whether it's Robinhood or you have an interactive broker or a Charles Schwab, you can get into the public markets very easily, right? How do you get into the private markets? No chance, almost no chance. If you are not Bill Gates or Peter Thiel or you are very wealthy, you're well connected or live in Silicon Valley, you cannot get in. And that's the problem, right? With that in mind, was our crowd created. This is really John's vision, John Madved's vision, and it's absolutely genius how he came up with this idea. And now you can put in $10,000, $50,000. Just very important, because I'm not pitching your crowd, but very important that hear this and you wanted to do, you have to be still an accredited investor. So this is not fully retail. If you don't, you need to be something called accredited investor.
And you can't put it, you're not going to put in $100.
No, the minimum is 10,000 per deal. Yeah. Or 50,000 if it's a fund, but basically, yeah. It's democratic, but I like to call it, and please, I don't know if I should, I hope nobody will quote me on that. It's kind of a little bit like Greek democracy, if that makes sense, right? You still have to have, but it's democratic, but it's still not
once you're at a certain threshold.
Right. So that was the idea, and really John's vision was at that time, it was crazy because the regulations were still not there. Today, there is SEC and all the regulations supporting this. But yeah, that really basically you can put into Masterclass, which we just invested in, or you can Uber or Lemonade, which is we hit two of the best. The best IPO of 2020 was a company called Lemonade, which is an insurtech company. Probably many of it's an Israeli insurtech company that we invested in, and you could have put in $10,000 in that deal. And we have a company that the year before 2019, the best IPO on Nasdaq was Lemonade went NYC. So it's New York Stock Exchange, Beyond Meat, Nasdaq, best IPO 2019, also one of our companies. We were in Uber, we were actually both one of our companies. So you can get into these really amazing stories with as little as $10,000.
Now, obviously, when you're going into these deals, a private investor, if he's participating, he's obviously only getting a small slice of that bigger picture. But
very important what you're saying, with a small slice, but you still get the same valuation and the same deal terms, right? Which means that you get the same protections, which again, if you invest, let's say you're an angel investor and you get extra somehow, you put in $50,000 or $100,000 into a deal without aggregating everybody else's strength together, you will lose protections, which is super important: anti-dilution, preemptive, ratchets, whatever it is. And we are professional VC investors, so we know what we're doing. And then you can come, we can take your and all the other 5,000 investors aggregate power to negotiate the deal. And from the company, when we negotiate with the company, the portfolio company, we come in with $10 million, the same as Sequoia or Andreessen Horowitz or NEA.
From their perspective, it doesn't make a difference. It's the same money.
Yeah, basically.
When an investor invests, do they pick a specific company, or are they joining a fund and their risk is spread across all these different investments?
Great question. I have a good Jewish answer. LVL, both.
Both. That's a Rabbi Gershenfeld answer.
Yeah, that's a Rabbi Gershenfeld answer. Correct. Yeah, both. You can decide. It really depends what you want. But I think what you said is very, very important. When you come into the markets, when you start investing, you need to diversify. You need to mitigate the risk, and you do that by minimum investing. I always tell my investors, if you're not ready to do at least 10 deals, don't start. Unless you are like a corporate or like a strategically, you only need, you want to invest in cybersecurity or quantum computing or whatever, because this is your interest. You need to build a diversified portfolio. And you can do a fund. By the way, we built a fund for that. So you can do 50 deals with $50,000. You can invest in a fund with 50 deals.
Like a VC mutual fund of sorts.
Basically, yeah. By the way, I love it. Yeah, we call it portfolio index. It's basically, although it's not an index fund, but it's the closest probably VC ever tried to do an index fund.
So what's your actual role? And you said you spent a lot of time in Asia. So I guess you're trying to hunt the next big thing in Hong Kong or wherever it might be. What's your role?
So my role is, on paper, I'm a managing partner, which means I do everything from deal to bringing new deals, helping the portfolio companies. But let's put it on, like, practically most of my time I spend with fundraising, bringing in some of our most critical and most important investors, which are some of the biggest financial institutions. We are not only good for small investors, but we have a track record of attracting some of the biggest, most sophisticated financial institutions, corporations, and some of the most well-known family offices around the world to invest with us. So who are investing tens of millions of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars. And that's what I do. I mainly focused in the last couple of years, I focused on Asia. Started with China, Hong Kong, Korea, Singapore, Thailand, and now last year and a half, a lot in Japan as well.
What have been some of your experiences over there, and especially navigating that as a observant Jew?
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have? Incredible. Like, it's so different, both good and bad, right? I'll tell you maybe a story. That's maybe I think that's like a microcosm of my life. Okay, so I built a relationship with an investor. If I tell the story, I can't use his name. one of the most well-known Chinese investor, and it's not Jack Ma. Before I worked with Jack Ma.
Are you the one who kidnapped him, or what's?
No, and no comments.
Like, we can't find him. He's like, oh, he's in Israel.
No, you can.
He's eating falafel with Dennis in Tel Aviv.
No, yeah, he's doing well. He's doing well. Actually, I can confirm that. Jack invited me to his home, and I had lunch with him, which is another story how we made it kosher and everything. But it's a great story, and I brought his whole family to Israel. And by the way, we had lunch at the Claimants on the rooftop, looking at
beautiful.
So Abba and Pamela hosted the whole Ma family. Anyway, so it's not him, but the investor, the ecosystem would know who that person is. Is one of the really most sophisticated investors. So I had a relationship, I built a business relationship with him, and I brought him to Israel first time. And as always, I mean, the Chinese are some of the most hardworking people in the world. You have your first breakfast meeting at 7 a.m., second breakfast meeting at 7:45 to 8:30, and then we had at 9 o'clock to work until 7 p.m. back-to-back meetings. At 7:30, 8 p.m. we go for dinner, and again with clients or with government officials, Knesset members, whatever, Prime Minister, etc., etc. Every single time, I make sure that they stay in Israel for Shabbat, which is, after the high-tech craziness is the most low-tech possible, yeah, right? And it's the most incredible. That is basically when we stamp the relationship. And I want to say we close the deal, although we don't close deals on Shabbat, but that's not the. So with this specific time, I was hosting this gentleman. Actually, we went for John Medved for dinner. But before that, I talked to Pamela and Abba, and we said, "Can I have a glass of wine with him on the rooftop?" So 4 p.m. We were looking at the Kotel for the Kotel, the old city, and we have a glass of Cabernet in hand, and he tells me, "Dennis, listen, I've been working with you for 2 years. Tell me, what is this Shabbat? I mean, come on, what is this?" And you've been managing my money now for years, but come on, how can you, like a professional businessman, just turn off your phone for 24 hours when or 25 actually, but when you know that anything can happen any minute? Yeah, I can reach you. I know if I call you 4 a.m., 2 a.m., but for one day, how can you do business like that? And what is this Shabbat? So how can you explain that, right? And you try to say, it's not turning off, but you're turning off. Yeah, as much as we are unplugging, it's more about plugging in because we're plugging in something bigger. I tried to give all these kind of half cliche answers. And he asked, how can you live in a life where you're not permitted to use your phone? And so I was thinking, maybe the best way to answer is not that we are not permitted to use our phone, but we are permitted not to use our phones. That makes sense, right? We have a day today where we have an incredible excuse that everybody accepts. Because I tell him in the first day, by the way, I don't work on Friday. On Friday, sunset tonight, I don't work. If you don't want to work with me, say it now. But I have actually an excuse. Imagine, I'm just thinking, if we had the holy golf day, right? A holy golf day. And I don't I'm sorry, Mr. But I have a holy golf day on Friday or Saturdays, so you don't come in. And he has this huge deal, and he calls me, "Sorry, sir, I'm not taking my call because I have a holy golf day." And you can't, I'm thinking about, there's no other excuse in the world where you have a day of, we can unplug for a day, and people understand it, all right? And people respect it, because even though, if you don't want to do business, then don't do. But if everything else they would break, come on, this is important. This is an important deal. Go tomorrow, a day after, for 2 days of golfing, but today you have to do this deal, right? No, I'm not, my holy. So we had a great dinner and everything, and I saw that he was it penetrated into his soul, he doesn't know what to do, and he goes, "Okay, I got it, Dennis. Let's move on." So 3 months later, as I was in Hong Kong, and I was in 45th floor in the most gorgeous business office, and we're sitting, and I sit and I present his portfolio, and we go through, and he's the most professional man. And in 59.5 minutes, he gets up and he said, "Thank you so much. See you next week." Basically, walks me to the door. The Chinese, by the way, always have the 3 amos. They walk you through the door. They don't let you. They walk you through the elevator. The Jewish tradition as well. But something strange happened. He puts his hand to my shoulder, saying, "Okay, what's going on?" He never did that. And he says, I want to tell you two things. I said, okay. First, what you showed me in Israel inspired me so much. So when I came back, I had to fly to Beijing, meeting President Xi, the president of China. And I just came back from Israel, so I told him what I've seen, all these entrepreneurs and the miracle story, and he was so excited about it that he said that I want you to write and give a speech at the National Communist Party Congress, which is watched by 1 billion people. I want you to speak on Israel. I want you to give over what you learn on Israel. And he told me, Dennis, can you please write my speech? So I wrote his speech.
In Chinese? No.
No, I don't know Spanish. So I wrote this speech, which potentially was watched by 1 billion people plus my mother. But then he continues. I said, also want to tell you another thing. Remember our discussion about Shabbat? I said, sure. So I want you to know, since I came back, I'm keeping Shabbat. I said, what? I was looking for a stone, but I have to stone him. And he says, no, don't worry. I keep it on Sunday. Since I came back. So this was in 2016. For 5 years, he still keeps Shabbat. I know for a fact. I mean, first of all, he's one of my biggest investors. And I know because his colleagues tell me, first of all, I'm like, I have basically a picture with a crown in the office now, because all the rest of the people also have a day of Shabbat, because he worked, he's over 60, he worked every single day of his life, basically. And now the rest of the team also has a day, because they also have to work before, and now they also have a day. So they're like, whatever I need, they take
care of you. But now there's 2 days in a row that you can't do business with him.
Right. Exactly. I paid a huge price. Correct. So, that's my job, basically. But that, I think summarizes my job. You, on one way, representing Israel, and the second, you represent Judaism. And that I deal with every single day, every single moment of my life. When I'm out there, I'm representing both Israel and Judaism. And of course, it may be some challenges, but I think it feels an incredible privilege to do that.
Just in closing, what's it been like for you the last 13, 14 months with travel being so restricted, and especially, going to the Far East where so much of this originated? What's COVID been like, and how do you think it's going to change the way that we do business and change your life moving forward?
So I have a little bit different perspective on it, because I got actually married 3 months before COVID. So it was perfect timing for many reasons, because if I had to do this alone, I don't know how I would have survived. I was extremely lucky to be married and to have a partner who I adore and love, and have an incredible relationship. According to the Jewish tradition, you have a Shana Rishonah. So I don't know. I keep telling her, I don't know, but you prayed well. The
whole world had to suffer for.
The whole world had to suffer from it, but because you wanted to have a real Shana Rishonah. Because I've been literally traveling 70% of my time. Every 2 weeks, I was on a flight to Asia before. So, and I was for 13 months. I'm in the same place, right? So it was an incredible opportunity to build a real Jewish traditional, according to the Jewish tradition, to build a real relation with my wife. So that's amazing. Very, very lucky. Business-wise, I'm not going to, lie to you. It's been very, very challenging. We actually, our crowd had the best year. And, you can do a lot through Zoom with relationships that you already have. That worked. But to build new relationships, been very challenging, especially in Asia, because Asia is much less transactional. Western Europe, America, you can, it's basically numbers game. You do this, bam, bam, we open up a data room, we look at it, okay, you work, okay, one, done, yes, no. But in Asia, they want to feel you, they want to dine with you, they want to be with you, they want to understand who you are, and they do a little 300, and it takes a year or sometimes 2 years until you really build a relationship with someone before they write a check. And that has been obviously very, very difficult, because Zoom is good for a lot of things, but not to build real relationships.
I think a lot of people worldwide have felt that as well. You can maintain relationships, but not so easy to inaugurate new ones. And I think, we've all learned that there's things we can replace, and we can maybe be more efficient in our time. And at the same time, there's things that we can never replace without that personal touch. And, I think that we've all learned that around the world. So Dennis, thank you so much for your time. It's an amazing story. And I just love that the synthesis between your personal odyssey and the business journey, which really, combined together. And it seems like you've really found a role that allows you to express the essence of who you are, this yippie within yourself, while embracing and thriving in business. So I think it's a great example for so many others. And I'm so grateful that you joined us.
It's my honor, and good luck with everything.
Dene Ban, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
This has been Ari Koretsky on Jews You Should Know. Please visit us at jewsyoushouldknow.com and subscribe at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you consume podcasts. Find us on social media at Jews You Should Know. If you'd like to become a supporter of this podcast, we would greatly appreciate that, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Jews You Should Know. Finally, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review so that we can continue to grow and introduce many more people to Jews You Should Know.